The Mercedes engine cut through the pre-dawn silence like a knife, and I knew my life was about to change forever. I just didn't know I'd be the one holding the weapon. There I was at 5:47 a.m., bleach-stained apron around my waist, scrubbing dried syrup off table 7, when my sister Victoria stepped out of her pristine white luxury car and delivered the words that would cost her everything. Still playing waitress, Elena? How quaint. She had no idea that the pathetic little sister she was mocking had just inherited an empire worth more than her mansion, her medical practice, and her precious Mercedes combined. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Have you ever worked your fingers raw for someone you love, only to watch your own flesh and blood treat you like hired help? My name is Elena Rosetti, and from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Because what started as my sister mocking my simple life ended with her discovering that sometimes the person cleaning your grandmother's tables owns a lot more than just the cleaning supplies. But let me take you back to that morning in Belfield, Connecticut, where our family's 100-year-old diner, Rose's Kitchen, sits on the corner of Elm and 3rd Street like a stubborn old woman refusing to move for progress. The neon sign flickers, the O in Rose's has been broken for 6 months, and the vinyl booths have been patched so many times they look like quilts. This wasn't some trendy retro aesthetic. This was pure, working-class survival. I'd been coming here every morning at 5:30 a.m. since I was 16. Not because I had to anymore, I was 28 and could have found other work. But because my grandmother, Rosa Benedetta Rossetti, the woman who raised me after our parents died in that car accident on Route 9, was 83 and still insisted on flipping pancakes herself. Someone had to help her. Someone had to care. Victoria certainly didn't. Dr. Victoria Rossetti Hamilton now, thank you very much. Married to Dr. Marcus Hamilton, living in their 4-bedroom colonial in Westfield Heights, driving cars that cost more than most people make in 2 years. She'd finished medical school at Yale, completed her residency at Hartford General, and now ran a private practice specializing in cosmetic dermatology. Translation: she made rich people look younger while I made sure our dying grandmother didn't collapse face first into the pancake batter. That morning, she wasn't there for coffee and eggs. She was there for what she called her monthly charity visit, 20 minutes of air kisses and small talk before rushing back to her real life. But this time was different. This time, she had news. "Nah," she announced, sliding into booth 3 without removing her designer coat. "Marcus and I have been talking. We think it's time you consider Sunset Manor. It's a lovely facility in Glastonbury. Very appropriate for someone your age." I froze mid-wipe, the rag-dripping cleaning solution onto my worn sneakers. Sunset Manor. I knew that place. $37,000 a year for what amounted to a room the size of our storage closet and 3 meals that looked like they'd been pre-chewed. "Victoria," I started, but Nana raised a weathered hand. "This is my restaurant," she said quietly, her Italian accent still thick after 60 years in America. "When I die here. Not in some place that smells like disinfectant and broken dreams." Victoria's perfectly contoured face tightened. "Nana, be reasonable. You can't keep running this place forever. And Elena." She glanced at me like I was a stain on the tablecloth. "Elena can't take care of you properly. She's not qualified. Not qualified. As if love required a medical degree." "I take perfectly good care of her," I said, my voice steady despite the fury building in my chest. Victoria laughed that crystalline laugh she'd perfected in medical school. "Elena, sweetheart, you clean tables. You serve coffee to truckers and construction workers. That's not exactly skilled care, is it? When Nana needs real help, medical help, what are you going to do? Google it?" She stood up, smoothing her coat. "I'm trying to be practical here. Nana needs professional care, and this place." She gestured around the diner with obvious distaste. "This place is bleeding money. It would be kinder to everyone involved to just let it go. Let it go." Like our grandmother's life work was some high school hobby she'd outgrown. "The building's worth maybe $200,000 if you could find a buyer, which is doubtful in this neighborhood. The equipment's ancient. The customer base is shrinking every year. Face it, Elena, you're both living in the past. She kissed Nana's cheek, leaving a perfect lipstick print, and headed for the door. But she paused, hand on the handle, and delivered her final blow. Oh, and Elena? When you're ready to stop playing restaurant and start thinking about your future, Marcus has connections at Mercy Hospital. I could probably get you a job in housekeeping. It's more suited to your skill set. The door chimed as she left, and through the window, I watched her slide into her Mercedes and drive away, probably already thinking about her next appointment to inject Botox into some socialite's forehead. Nana sat in booth 3, staring at her coffee cup, suddenly looking every one of her 83 years. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She means well, Nana whispered, but we both knew that wasn't true. I hung up my apron and sat across from her, taking her papery hands in mine. They were spotted with age and scarred from decades of kitchen burns, but they were the hands that had braided my hair for school, taught me to make perfect marinara sauce, and held me when nightmares about the accident woke me screaming. Nana, I said gently, is there anything you haven't told me about this place? About the family? Anything important? She looked at me for a long moment, then squeezed my hands. Elena, mia cara, there are many things about this family that your sister doesn't know. Many things she assumes that are not true. And that's when everything started to change. Because sometimes the person everyone underestimates is the one holding all the cards. They just haven't looked at their hand yet. I'd been trying to bridge the gap with Victoria for over a decade. Every birthday, every holiday, every major milestone in her perfect life, I showed up. I smiled. I played the role of the proud little sister who was just so grateful to bask in her success. When she graduated medical school, I worked double shifts for 3 months to afford the designer watch I gave her. She wore it once, to the graduation dinner, then I never saw it again. When she got engaged to Marcus, I spent my entire savings account on her bridal shower, a champagne brunch at the Belfield Country Club that cost more than I made in 6 months. She complained the whole time that the flowers weren't the right shade of blush pink. But I kept trying. Because that's what you do for family, right? You keep hoping that someday they'll see your worth, that all your efforts will finally mean something. 3 years ago, when Victoria bought her practice, I suggested we throw a celebration dinner at Rose's kitchen. We could close early, make it special for the family, I'd offered. Nana could cook your favorite, her famous osso buco. Victoria had looked at me like I'd suggested we celebrate in a garbage dump. Elena, I can't bring my colleagues to this place. What would they think? I'm a doctor now. I have an image to maintain. Instead, she held her celebration at Chez Laurent, the French restaurant in Hartford where entrees started at $60. I wasn't invited. It's just for the medical community, she'd explained. You wouldn't really fit in. Last Christmas, I handmade her a photo album filled with pictures from our childhood, the two of us helping Nana in the kitchen, building snowmen in the backyard, playing dress-up in our mother's old clothes. It took me weeks to put together, printing photos, writing captions, arranging everything perfectly. I thought maybe, just maybe, it would remind her of who we used to be. She flipped through it in about 30 seconds during Christmas dinner, said, "How nice," and set it aside. Later, I found it in the back seat of her car, buried under dry cleaning receipts. But the worst part wasn't the gifts she dismissed or the invitations she never extended. It was the way she talked about our life here, our grandmother's legacy, like it was something to be ashamed of. You know, Elena, she'd said during one of her monthly visits, you're wasting your potential. You're smart enough, you got good grades in high school. You could have gone to college, made something of yourself. Made something of myself. As if caring for our grandmother, keeping our family's restaurant alive, serving honest food to honest people was nothing. As if the life our parents had planned for us, the life Nana had built with her bare hands, was somehow lesser than her world of Botox injections and country club memberships. I'd tried explaining it to her once. How Rose's kitchen wasn't just a restaurant, it was a gathering place for the neighborhood, a second home for the lonely widowers who came in every morning for coffee and conversation, a safe haven for the single mothers working double shifts who knew they could always get a good meal here even when money was tight. "That's very noble, Elena," she'd said in that patronizing voice that made my teeth clench. "But nobility doesn't pay the bills. And it certainly doesn't provide for Nana's future medical needs." She was always bringing up money, always pointing out how much more she made, how much more stable her life was. When Nana had that scare with her heart 2 years ago, just a minor palpitation, but enough to land her in the ER, Victoria had swooped in like she was the family savior. "I handled everything," she'd announced to the relatives who gathered in the waiting room. "Made sure she got the best cardiologist, pulled some strings to get her a private room. Thank God someone in this family has the connections to ensure proper care. Never mind that I was the one who'd been holding Nana's hand in the ambulance, the one who'd stayed by her bedside for 3 days straight, the one who knew exactly which medications she was allergic to and which ones made her nauseous." Victoria showed up for the dramatic moments, the parts where she could be the hero, then disappeared back to her suburban paradise. The pattern was always the same. I'd hoped things would be different this time. I'd believed that maybe she'd finally see past her own success long enough to remember we were sisters. And every time, she'd find a new way to remind me that in her world, I was just the family disappointment. But this morning felt different. The way Nana's eyes had lit up when I asked about family secrets, the mysterious smile that crossed her weathered face, it was the first time in years I'd seen her look anything other than tired. "Elena," she'd said, patting my hand, "your sister thinks she knows everything about this family, about this restaurant, about what we're worth. But there are things, important things, that happened long before she was born. Things that change everything." For the first time in my adult life, I felt something other than resignation when I thought about Victoria's next visit. I felt curiosity. And maybe, just maybe, a tiny spark of hope that this time, the tables might finally turn. After all, Victoria had spent so many years telling me I didn't understand the real world, that I was too naive, too simple to grasp the complexities of success and finance. But what if she was the one who didn't understand? What if the simple diner girl had been sitting on something more valuable than all her degrees and connections combined? Only one way to find out. The call came 3 days later, while I was refilling the sugar dispensers during the afternoon lull. Nana was in the back, prepping vegetables for the dinner rush, humming an old Italian song she used to sing to me when I was little. The phone rang, not my cell, but the restaurant's landline, the one with the curly cord that had been hanging on the kitchen wall since 1987. "Rosa's Kitchen, this is Elena." "Miss Rosetti?" "This is Margaret Thornfield from Thornfield, Walsh and Associates. I'm calling regarding your grandmother, Rosa Benedetta Rosetti." My blood went cold. Lawyers calling about elderly relatives usually meant one thing. "Is everything okay? Is she?" "Oh no, nothing like that," the woman's voice was warm, reassuring. "I'm actually calling about some estate planning matters. Your grandmother contacted us earlier this week about updating some documents. She mentioned you specifically and asked that I reach out to you directly." I glanced toward the kitchen, where I could still hear Nana's humming. "Estate planning?" She didn't mention anything to me about that. "Yes, well, she was quite insistent that certain matters be handled discreetly. She did mention that you've been the primary caregiver and that you're most familiar with the day-to-day operations of the restaurant. She wanted to ensure you were properly informed about the family's financial situation." Financial situation. We lived paycheck to paycheck. What financial situation? "I'm not sure I understand, Miss Thornfield. Perhaps we could arrange a meeting? Your grandmother suggested tomorrow afternoon, around 2 o'clock, when you typically have fewer customers. She said you'd know the time." She was right, 2 o'clock was our dead zone, the quiet hour between the lunch rush and the early dinner crowd. But how did this lawyer know our schedule? "How long have you been working with my grandmother?" There was a pause. "Well, that's part of what we need to discuss. Let's just say our firm has been handling certain Rosetti family matters for quite some time. Longer than you might expect." After I hung up, I stood staring at the phone for a full minute. Nana appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron, that same mysterious smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Who was that, cara mia? A lawyer. Margaret Thornfield. She said you called her about estate planning. Nana nodded slowly. Ah, yes. Margaret. She's very good. Very thorough. Nana, what's going on? What estate planning? What financial situation? We don't have. Elena, she interrupted gently, sit down. I slumped into the nearest booth, the one with the rip in the vinyl that I'd been meaning to fix for months. Nana slid in across from me, her weathered hands folded on the table. Your sister thinks she knows everything about this family. She thinks she's the smart one, the successful one, the one who understands money and business. She is successful, Nana. She's a doctor. She has that big house, the practice. Success. Nana waved a dismissive hand. What is success? Making money from other people's vanity? Living in a house so big you rattle around like a marble in a shoebox? Forgetting where you come from? I'd heard variations of this speech before, usually when Victoria had been particularly condescending during one of her visits. But today felt different. Today, Nana's voice carried a weight I'd never heard before. There are things about this family, about this building, about what your grandfather and I built here, that Victoria doesn't know. Things that perhaps, it's time for you to learn. Before I could ask what she meant, the door chimed, and Officer Martinez walked in. Joe Martinez had been coming to Rosa's kitchen for 15 years, ever since he started walking the downtown beat. Coffee, black, with a slice of whatever pie we had that day. He was as regular as clockwork. Afternoon, ladies, he said, settling onto his usual stool at the counter. Elena, you got any of that apple pie left? Sure thing, Joe. I started to get up, but Nana put a hand on my arm. I'll get it, she said, then called toward the counter. Joe, you know anything about property records in this town? Old records, from maybe the 1950s? Joe accepted his coffee and pie, thinking. Property records? Sure, they're all digitized now, but the old ones are still in the basement of City Hall. Why? Just curious about the history of this place. You know how old people get, sentimental about the past. Joe chuckled. Rosa, you're not old, you're vintage. Like a fine wine. He took a bite of pie. If you're serious about looking into it, my cousin Danny works in the records department. He could probably help you out. Though I gotta warn you, some of those old files are a mess. Decades of different filing systems. That's very kind, Nana said. Perhaps Elena could visit him sometime. She's always been interested in family history. This was news to me, but I nodded along. After Joe left, I turned to Nana. What was that about? Research, Kara. Sometimes the truth is buried in paperwork, hidden in file cabinets, forgotten in basements. But the truth doesn't disappear just because people stop looking for it. What truth, Nana? You're being cryptic, and it's making me nervous. She reached across the table and took my hands in hers. Elena, tomorrow when you meet with Margaret, you're going to learn things that will surprise you. Things that might make you angry, might make you sad, but will definitely make you stronger. Are you sick? Is that what this is about? No, Mia Kara. I'm not sick. I'm just tired of secrets. Tired of watching you doubt yourself because your sister makes you feel small. Tired of her thinking she's better than us, better than this place, when she doesn't even know what this place really is. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear construction noise from the new development going up on Maple Street, luxury condos that would bring young professionals to the neighborhood. People like Victoria. Nana, I said quietly, what aren't you telling me? Tomorrow, Elena. Tomorrow you'll understand everything. And then you can decide what you want to do with what you learn. She stood up, smoothing her apron. But I will tell you this, your sister is about to discover that the simple diner girl she's been looking down on for all these years has been sitting on something much more valuable than medical degrees." As she walked back toward the kitchen, I heard her humming again, but this time the melody sounded different. Less wistful, more triumphant. My phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. "Nana mentioned you're meeting with some lawyer tomorrow. Hope you're not getting scammed. These old people are so vulnerable to financial predators. Maybe I should be there." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Thanks for the concern, but I can handle it." For the first time in my life, I meant it. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm, my mind racing with questions about the lawyer meeting. But as I got ready for another day at Rose's kitchen, memories I'd buried for years started surfacing, moments that suddenly seemed more significant than I'd realized at the time. I was 7 when our parents died. Victoria was 12, old enough to remember more, old enough to understand what we'd lost. But she was also old enough to resent the upheaval, the way our lives shifted from suburban comfort to the cramped apartment above the restaurant where Nana lived. "This is temporary," Victoria had announced on our first night in the tiny room we'd have to share. "As soon as I'm old enough, I'm getting us out of here." Even then, she saw Rose's kitchen as a prison, not a sanctuary. Nana tried her best to fill the holes our parents left behind. She taught us to cook, to serve customers with a smile, to take pride in honest work. But Victoria absorbed different lessons. She watched our classmates get dropped off at school in newer cars, go on family vacations we couldn't afford, wear clothes that didn't smell like fryer oil. And she decided that everything about our life was something to escape from. "Elena's the lucky one," she used to tell her friends in high school. "She doesn't remember what we had before. She doesn't know what we lost." But I did remember some things. I remembered our father reading bedtime stories in a voice that made every character come alive. I remembered our mother singing while she cooked Sunday dinner, the whole house smelling like rosemary and garlic. I remembered feeling safe, wanted, loved without conditions. What Victoria never understood was that I found those same feelings at Rose's kitchen. When Nana would let me crack eggs into the big mixing bowl, when regular customers would ask about my school projects, when I'd fall asleep at a back booth doing homework while the dinner crowd chatted and laughed around me, that felt like family too. But Victoria saw it as settling. She threw herself into academics with the fierce determination of someone fighting her way out of quicksand. Perfect grades, perfect test scores, perfect college applications. She'd study at the restaurant's back table, surrounded by textbooks and highlighters, pointedly ignoring the warmth and community happening around her. "I'm going to be somebody," she'd mutter when customers tried to engage her in conversation. "I'm not going to spend my life serving other people." The irony, of course, was that she'd chosen a career built entirely on serving other people, just people who could afford to pay premium prices for her services. When Victoria left for college, she took her resentment with her. She'd come home for holidays with stories about her roommates' family vacations, her classmates' internships, the opportunities that came with having connections. She'd walk through Rose's kitchen like she was touring a museum of her unfortunate past. "You don't have to stay here forever, you know," she'd tell me during one Christmas break, when I was 17 and had already decided to skip college to help Nana full-time. "There are community colleges, student loans. You could still make something of yourself." Make something of myself. As if I hadn't already become something, someone who could manage the breakfast rush single-handedly, who knew exactly how Mrs. Peterson liked her coffee and what Mr. Kowalski would order before he even sat down, who could balance the books and sweet-talk suppliers into extending payment terms during slow months. But in Victoria's world, none of that counted as achievement. Achievement meant degrees and salaries and houses in the right neighborhoods. Achievement meant distance from this place, from these people, from the smell of bacon grease and the sound of coffee percolating. The summer before she started medical school, she brought home a boyfriend, some pre-med student from a family that owned pharmaceutical patents. He'd sat in booth 2, checking his phone every few minutes, clearly uncomfortable with the vinyl seats and formica tables. "This is quaint," he'd said, the same word Victoria would use years later when describing my life. "Very authentic." Authentic. Like we were a theme restaurant instead of a real business that had fed 3 generations of neighborhood families. That night, I'd overheard Victoria talking to him in the apartment upstairs. "Don't worry," she'd said. "This isn't my real life. This is just where I came from. Where I'm stuck until I can afford to get Elena and Nana set up somewhere more appropriate." Somewhere more appropriate. Even then, she was planning to dismantle everything Nana had built, everything our grandparents had sacrificed for. By the time Victoria married Marcus, the distance between us had become a chasm. She'd invite me to events where I'd be introduced as my sister. She helps run the family restaurant. Never my sister, who kept our family business alive, or my sister, who took care of our grandmother while I was building my career. I was always the sister with the small life, the simple ambitions, the limited understanding of the real world. The worst part was that I started to believe her narrative. When she'd talk about investment portfolios and retirement planning, I'd nod along even though I barely had enough in savings to cover a major restaurant repair. When she'd mention her clients' summer homes in the Hamptons, I'd smile and act impressed, even though I hadn't taken a real vacation in 8 years. She made me feel like I was living in a smaller, lesser version of life, like I'd chosen security over ambition, comfort over growth, the familiar over the possible. But sitting here now, in the early morning quiet of Rosa's kitchen, watching the sun stream through windows that had witnessed decades of family meals and neighborhood conversations, I wondered if Victoria had it backwards. Maybe I hadn't chosen the smaller life. Maybe I'd chosen the deeper one. Maybe while she was climbing ladders and collecting credentials, I'd been building something more valuable: relationships, community, a place where people mattered more than profit margins. Or maybe I was just trying to make myself feel better about being the sister who'd never left home. In a few hours, I'd sit across from Margaret Thornfield and learn whatever secrets Nana had been keeping. Whatever I discovered, I had a feeling it would change everything I thought I knew about my family, my choices, and my worth. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of that change. I was ready for it. At exactly 2 o'clock, Margaret Thornfield walked through the door of Rosa's kitchen carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than I made in a month. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun and the kind of confident stride that comes from winning battles in courtrooms. "Elena?" She extended a manicured hand. "Margaret Thornfield. Thank you for meeting with me." I led her to booth 6, the one in the back corner where we could talk privately. Nana emerged from the kitchen with a coffee pot and 2 cups, setting them down with the practiced grace of someone who'd been serving people for 60 years. "Margaret," Nana said warmly, like they were old friends. "You look well. As do you, Rosa. Though I have to say, it's been far too long since we've spoken face to face." I looked between them, confused. "How long have you two known each other?" Margaret opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick manila folder. "Your grandmother and I first met in 1987, when she needed legal assistance with some property matters. I was fresh out of law school then, working for the firm's senior partner who handled real estate law." 1987, I repeated. "That's 36 years ago." "Indeed. Your grandmother was quite young herself then, not much older than you are now. She'd just inherited this building from her mother-in-law, your great-grandmother Francesca." I blinked. "Inherited the building? I thought Nana and Grandpa bought this place." Margaret and Nana exchanged a look. "That's one of the things we need to discuss," Margaret said carefully. "Elena, what has your grandmother told you about how she came to own Rosa's kitchen?" "She and Grandpa saved up for years," I said, the story I'd heard countless times rolling off my tongue. "They worked multiple jobs, lived in a tiny apartment, scrimped and saved until they could afford the down payment on this place in 1962. Nana reached across the table and patted my hand. "That's what I told everyone, Kara. It was simpler that way." Margaret opened the folder and pulled out a document that looked ancient, yellowed paper with old-fashioned typewriter font. "This is the original deed transfer from 1962. But Elena, this building has been in your family much longer than that." She spread out what looked like a family tree, but instead of names and birth dates, it showed property ownership and business licenses. Your great-great-grandfather, Giuseppe Rosetti, purchased this entire city block in 1924. Not just the building where the restaurant sits now, the entire block. I stared at the papers, trying to process what she was saying. The entire block? Giuseppe was what we'd call a real estate visionary today, Margaret continued. He saw potential in this neighborhood when everyone else saw urban decay. He bought cheap, held on to properties, and reinvested strategically. Nana leaned forward. Giuseppe was my husband's grandfather. When he died in 1951, the properties were supposed to pass to his oldest son, my father-in-law, Antonio. But Antonio, he had problems. Gambling, Margaret said bluntly. Antonio was heavily in debt to some very dangerous people. Giuseppe's will included a provision that if Antonio was deemed financially irresponsible, the inheritance would skip a generation. Skip to who? I asked, though something in my chest was already starting to flutter with possibility. To his daughter-in-law, Nana said quietly. To me. Margaret pulled out another document. In 1962, when your grandparents bought this restaurant, what actually happened was that Rosa exercised her legal right to claim the property that had always belonged to her. The story about saving money and taking out loans, that was to protect Antonio's pride, and to avoid unwanted attention from his creditors. I felt like the floor was tilting beneath me. So Nana, you've owned this building outright since 1962? No mortgage, no loans? Not just this building, Elena. Margaret turned to a map of downtown Belfield that looked like it had been marked up by a military strategist. Red X's marked various properties throughout the neighborhood. Your grandmother currently owns 17 commercial properties in this district. The coffee cup slipped from my hands, clattering against the saucer. 17 properties? The auto repair shop next door, that's yours. The apartment complex 2 blocks over, yours. The strip mall on Maple Street where the new pharmacy and boutique opened last year, also yours. Margaret pointed to each red X on the map. Your grandmother has been collecting rent from these properties for decades. Very quietly, very discreetly. The income has been substantial. How substantial? My voice came out as barely a whisper. Nana reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a bank statement. The number at the bottom made my vision blur. $3.7 million, cara mia. That's just in the primary savings account. I stared at the number, unable to make sense of it. 3.7 million? Plus the property values, Margaret added. Current market assessment puts the total real estate portfolio at approximately $8.2 million. Your grandmother is, by any measure, a very wealthy woman. The restaurant suddenly felt like it was spinning. But we live paycheck to paycheck. We worry about making rent, about keeping the lights on. Last month you were stressed about the cost of fixing the walk-in freezer. Nana smiled that mysterious smile I'd been seeing more often lately. Elena, I've been testing you. Testing your character, your loyalty, your heart. Money changes people, I've seen it happen. Your sister, money made her cold, made her forget her family. I needed to know that you were different. Testing me? For 30 years, I've watched you choose this place, choose me, choose our family, even when it meant sacrificing your own comfort. Even when Victoria made you feel small for it. Even when the world told you that you were settling for less. Margaret leaned forward. Elena, your grandmother didn't just ask me here to tell you about the money. She asked me here to transfer ownership. The words hit me like a physical blow. Transfer ownership? Everything, Nana said firmly. The restaurant, the building, all 17 properties, all the accounts. I'm 83 years old, and I'm tired of managing an empire in secret. It's time for someone else to take over. Someone who understands what this family has built, someone who respects our history, someone who sees value in community, not just profit. Margaret pulled out a pen and placed it next to a stack of documents. Your grandmother has already signed. These papers will transfer complete ownership of the Rosetti family real estate portfolio to you, Elena. All you have to do is sign. My hands were shaking. What about Victoria? She's the older sister, she's the one with the business education, the financial experience. Victoria, Nana said with a firmness I'd rarely heard in her voice, has spent 15 years telling us we're worthless. Telling us this place is worthless. Telling us our life is small and meaningless. She can't appreciate what she doesn't respect. Margaret nodded. Your grandmother has been very clear about her wishes. Victoria will receive a modest inheritance, enough to be comfortable, but the bulk of the estate goes to you. I looked around Rosa's kitchen, the cracked vinyl booths, the flickering neon sign, the coffee-stained counter that had served thousands of customers over the decades. All this time, I'd thought I was the keeper of a struggling family business. I'd actually been the protector of a multi-million-dollar empire. There's one more thing, Nana said softly. Your sister doesn't know about any of it. She thinks this place is barely staying afloat, that I'm one medical emergency away from losing everything. When will you tell her? Nana's eyes sparkled with something that might have been mischief. I'm not going to tell her, Kara. You are. I signed the papers with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. Each signature felt like stepping through a doorway into a completely different life, one where I wasn't the struggling diner waitress, but the owner of a real estate empire worth more than Victoria's house, her practice, and her Mercedes combined. Margaret gathered the documents with practiced efficiency. Elena, you'll need to understand the scope of what you're inheriting. This isn't just about the money, though $8.2 million is certainly significant. You're now the landlord for dozens of businesses throughout downtown Belfield. She pulled out a different folder, this one thick with rental agreements and property management documents. Let me walk you through some of your tenants. The first lease agreement made my jaw drop. Belfield Medical Plaza. I read aloud. That's where Dr. Harrison's practice is. And Dr. Patel's office. And I looked up at Margaret. This is where Victoria sends all her referrals. Your property, Margaret confirmed. Your grandmother charges significantly below market rate because she believes in supporting local healthcare. Dr. Harrison pays $3,200 a month for a space that could easily command $5,000. Nana nodded. Good doctors shouldn't have to choose between serving the community and paying rent. Margaret flipped to the next lease. Belfield Luxury Automotive. That's the dealership where Victoria bought her Mercedes, I finished, staring at the letterhead. She bragged about getting a special deal because Marcus knew the owner. The owner is your tenant, Margaret said simply. Has been for 12 years. Very reliable, always pays on time. I felt something shifting in my chest, not quite revenge, but a dawning understanding of how completely Victoria had misunderstood our family's position in this town. She thought she was the success story, the one with connections and influence. But she'd been operating in an ecosystem that my grandmother had quietly controlled for decades. What about the strip mall on Maple Street? I asked, remembering Victoria's excitement when the high-end boutique opened there. Margaret smiled. Ah, yes. Maple Commons. That's actually one of your most profitable properties. The boutique, Elegance, pays $4,000 a month. The yoga studio next door pays $2,800. The coffee shop pays $3,500. Victoria shops at Elegance, I said, laughing despite myself. She spent $800 there last month on a handbag. She posted about it on Instagram, talking about supporting local businesses. She was supporting your business, Nana said with a grin. Indirectly, but still. Margaret continued through the portfolio. Property after property, business after business, and I began to see the web of connections that Victoria had never noticed. The gym where Marcus worked out. The restaurant where they celebrated anniversaries. The parking garage they used when attending events downtown. All of it, every single place they considered part of their sophisticated urban lifestyle, was owned by the family they'd been looking down on. There's something else, Margaret said, pulling out a municipal document. Your grandmother has been very involved in local development decisions. As one of the largest property owners in the downtown district, she has significant influence over zoning changes, business licenses, and development permits. I stared at the document, minutes from city planning meetings where Rosa Rossetti was listed as a participating stakeholder. "Nana, you attend city council meetings?" "Every month for the past 20 years, she said proudly. "Someone has to make sure this neighborhood doesn't get destroyed by developers who see dollar signs instead of community." The irony was breathtaking. While Victoria had been networking at country clubs and medical conferences, thinking she was building influence and connections, Nana had been quietly shaping the economic landscape of the entire downtown area. But why keep it secret? I asked. Why pretend we were struggling? Nana's expression grew serious. Because money changes people, Elena. I've seen it happen. When people know you have wealth, they treat you differently. They want things from you. They make assumptions about your character, your values. Margaret nodded. Your grandmother also wanted to protect the properties from unwanted attention. Downtown Belfield has been gentrifying rapidly. If developers knew that one family controlled so much prime real estate, the pressure to sell would have been enormous. Plus, Nana added, I needed to know who you really were. If you'd known about the money when you were 18, would you have stayed? Would you have chosen this life, this community, this family? Or would you have taken the easy path, like Victoria did? The question hit me like a revelation. Victoria hadn't just left because she was ambitious, she'd left because she assumed there was nothing here worth staying for. She'd never looked deeper, never asked questions, never considered that the modest exterior of Rose's kitchen might be hiding something extraordinary. She never asked, did she? I said suddenly. About the business, about the finances, about how we actually survived all these years. Never, Nana confirmed. She saw what she expected to see, a poor old woman clinging to a failing restaurant. She never wondered how I could afford to help with her college expenses, or how I managed to give her $5,000 for her wedding, or how I paid for my own medical care without insurance complaints. Margaret pulled out one final document, a property tax assessment. Elena, do you know what the city values this single building at? I shook my head. $1.3 million. Just this building, just the restaurant space. Your sister has been mocking a business that sits on property worth more than most people's entire net worth. The numbers were staggering, but what struck me most was the pattern of Victoria's blindness. She'd been so focused on climbing her own ladder that she'd never looked around to see where she actually stood in the landscape. She'd been networking with people who were, unknowingly, my tenants. She'd been shopping at businesses that paid rent to my family. She'd been building her identity around superiority to people who quietly controlled the economic foundation of her world. There's one more thing you should know, Margaret said, her voice taking on a different tone. Your sister has been asking questions. My stomach tightened. What kind of questions? She called my office yesterday. Wanted to know about elder law, about protecting elderly relatives from financial exploitation. She seemed to think your grandmother might be being taken advantage of by you. Nana laughed, actually laughed. She thinks you're stealing from me? Apparently, she's concerned that you're manipulating an old woman for financial gain. She mentioned something about wanting to establish a conservatorship to protect your grandmother's assets. The room went quiet. A conservatorship would mean Victoria taking legal control of Nana's finances, making all decisions about her care and living situation. It would mean Sunset Manor. It would mean the end of Rose's kitchen. It would mean the dismantling of everything our family had built. She doesn't know she's too late, I said quietly. No, Margaret agreed. She doesn't know she's too late. I looked around Rose's kitchen one more time, but now I saw it differently. This wasn't a humble family restaurant clinging to survival. This was the headquarters of a multi-million-dollar real estate empire. This was the heart of a community that my family had been quietly nurturing and protecting for generations. And Victoria wanted to destroy it because she thought it was worthless. Margaret, I said, my voice steadier than it had been all afternoon, what exactly does a conservatorship petition require? Margaret's explanation of conservatorship law was both enlightening and terrifying. Your sister would need to prove that your grandmother is mentally incompetent or being financially exploited, she said, spreading out legal documents across the table. Given that I've just transferred millions of dollars in assets to you, and given that Victoria doesn't know about the true extent of the estate, she might actually have a case, at least on paper. But Nana is completely competent, I protested. She runs this restaurant, manages customers, handles all the daily operations. I know that, and you know that, Margaret interrupted. But a court doesn't know that. If Victoria can present evidence of unusual financial activity, large transfers, changes in estate planning, sudden alterations to long-standing arrangements, a judge might order a competency evaluation pending investigation. Nana reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Elena, this is why we need to be smart about this. Your sister thinks she's protecting me from you, but what she's really trying to do is take control of something she doesn't understand. What's our timeline? I asked Margaret. How long before she can file? Conservatorship petitions can be filed relatively quickly, within days if she has the right documentation. But here's the thing, Elena, you're not just the potential defendant in this situation anymore. You're the property owner. You have resources now, and resources mean options. Margaret pulled out her phone and started scrolling through contacts. I'd like to bring in some colleagues. David Shin handles family law and elder protection cases. He can help us understand exactly what Victoria might try to argue. Sarah Martinez specializes in real estate law and municipal affairs. She knows every property dispute and zoning decision in this county. And Thomas Burke is a private investigator who's helped us with background research on complex family situations. A private investigator? The idea felt both thrilling and slightly terrifying. Elena, Margaret said seriously, you now own property worth over $8 million. If someone is threatening legal action that could potentially disrupt that ownership, you need to understand exactly what you're dealing with. That means understanding Victoria's financial situation, her motivations, her legal vulnerabilities, and her true intentions. Nana nodded approvingly. Your grandfather always said that knowledge is the best weapon. You can't fight an enemy you don't understand. Over the next hour, Margaret's colleagues began arriving at Rosa's kitchen like we were assembling a war council in the back booth of a neighborhood diner. Which, I realized, was exactly what we were doing. David Shin was a soft-spoken man in his 50s with kind eyes and the bearing of someone who'd spent years helping families navigate their worst moments. Elena, he said after Margaret had briefed him, the good news is that conservatorship are harder to establish than people think. The bad news is that the process itself can be disruptive and expensive, even if Victoria ultimately loses. Sarah Martinez was younger, maybe 35, with the sharp energy of someone who thrived on complicated legal puzzles. I've been looking at your property portfolio while driving over here, she said, pulling out a tablet. Margaret sent me the basic outline. This is fascinating. Your family essentially controls the economic backbone of downtown Belfield, but you've been operating so quietly that most people have no idea. That was intentional, Nana explained. Flying under the radar kept us safe from developers, from opportunists, from people who might want to pressure us to sell or change how we operate. Smart, Sarah agreed. But it also means that Victoria's ignorance of your true financial situation isn't unusual. Most people in town probably don't realize the scope of your holdings. Thomas Burke looked exactly like what I'd imagined a private investigator would look like, mid-40s, observant eyes, the kind of person who noticed everything but said little. I've done some preliminary research on Dr. Victoria Rosetti Hamilton, he said, consulting a leather notebook. Her practice is successful but not as profitable as it appears. She and her husband carry significant debt, mortgage on the house, loans for both practices, luxury car payments, credit cards. They live well, but they're leveraged. What does that mean for us? I asked. It means her motivation for pursuing a conservatorship might not be purely altruistic, David said carefully. If she believes your grandmother has assets that could help solve her own financial pressures. She wants the money, I finished. She doesn't want to protect Nana from me, she wants to protect her inheritance from me. Margaret nodded grimly. That's what we need to determine. And if that's the case, we need to be prepared to demonstrate not just that your grandmother is competent, but that Victoria's motivations are self-interested. Thomas flipped a page in his notebook. There's something else. Dr. Rosetti Hamilton has been making inquiries about property values in this neighborhood. She contacted 3 different real estate agents in the past month, asking about commercial property sales and development potential. The pieces were clicking into place. She thinks she can sell this place, I said. She thinks she can put Nana in Sunset Manor, sell the restaurant, and pocket whatever she imagines it's worth. Except she has no idea what it's actually worth, Sarah added. She's probably thinking this building might sell for $200,000 or $300,000. She doesn't know she'd be giving up an $8 million portfolio. David leaned forward. Here's what I recommend. We need to document everything: your grandmother's competency, the legitimacy of the asset transfer, the true value of the properties, and Victoria's real motivations. But we also need to be proactive. Proactive how? I asked. Victoria is operating from a position of assumed superiority and ignorance, Margaret explained. She thinks she's the responsible family member protecting a vulnerable elderly woman from a manipulative granddaughter. She has no idea that the vulnerable elderly woman is actually a real estate mogul, and that a manipulative granddaughter now controls more wealth than Victoria could imagine. So we let her dig her own hole, Thomas said with a slight smile. We document her assumptions, her statements, her actions. We let her file paperwork based on false premises. And then we respond with the truth. Sarah was already making notes on her tablet. I can prepare a comprehensive property valuation report. Get current market assessments, rental income documentation, the full scope of the portfolio. When Victoria files her conservatorship petition claiming your grandmother needs protection from financial exploitation, we'll be able to show the court exactly what she was trying to protect her from: inheriting millions of dollars. David can handle the competency documentation, Margaret continued. Medical evaluations, cognitive assessments, testimony from people who interact with your grandmother regularly and can attest to her mental sharpness. And I'll document Victoria's true motivations and financial situation, Thomas added. If she's planning to benefit financially from a conservatorship, the court needs to know that. I looked around the table at these 4 legal professionals who had, in the span of 2 hours, assembled a comprehensive strategy to protect everything my family had built. The contrast with this morning, when I'd been just Elena the waitress, worried about broken freezers and slow lunch rushes, was almost overwhelming. What about timing? I asked. When do we expect her to make her move? Margaret checked her calendar. Based on her phone call and the questions she was asking, I'd guess she's planning to file within the next week or 2. She'll want to act quickly, before what she perceives as further financial exploitation can occur. Then we need to be ready, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. Because when Victoria discovers what she's actually been trying to take from us, I want to make sure she understands exactly how badly she miscalculated. David smiled. Elena, I think your sister is about to learn that underestimating family can be a very expensive mistake. The next morning, I arrived at Rose's kitchen at 5 a.m. with a sense of purpose I'd never felt before. But instead of just preparing for the breakfast rush, I was implementing the first phase of our strategy. Thomas Burke had given me a small recording device, perfectly legal, Margaret assured me, since it was my property and my business. Elena, he'd explained the night before, if Victoria comes in making accusations or threats, we need documentation. Let her talk. Let her reveal her assumptions and motivations. The more she says while ignorant of the truth, the stronger our position becomes. I didn't have to wait long. At exactly 9:15 a.m., Victoria's Mercedes pulled up outside. Through the window, I watched her check her makeup in the rearview mirror before stepping out in what I now recognized as her serious business outfit, a navy blazer, pencil skirt, and heels that clicked authoritatively against the pavement. She walked into Rose's kitchen like she owned the place. In a few minutes, she was going to discover that I actually did. Elena, she said without preamble, sliding into booth 3, we need to talk. Good morning to you too, Victoria. I poured her coffee without asking, a small kindness that I somehow knew would make what came next even more devastating. I've been thinking about Nana's situation, and I'm concerned. Very concerned. She pulled out her phone and started scrolling through notes she'd apparently prepared. Yesterday, some lawyer I've never heard of called me back about estate planning matters involving our grandmother. That's a red flag, Elena. Elderly people don't suddenly start revising their estates unless someone is pressuring them. I kept my expression neutral while mentally noting that the recording device in my apron pocket was capturing every word. What exactly are you suggesting, Victoria? I'm suggesting that you're taking advantage of an old woman who trusts you. Her voice was calm, clinical, like she was delivering a diagnosis. Think about it rationally. You're 28 years old, you've never lived anywhere but this neighborhood, you have no real career prospects, and suddenly Nana is meeting with lawyers about estate planning? It doesn't take a medical degree to see what's happening here. What do you think is happening? Victoria leaned forward, her expression shifting into what I recognized as her caring professional face, the one she probably used with patience. Elena, I know this place means a lot to you. I know you feel protective of Nana. But you can't let emotional attachment cloud your judgment about what's best for her. And what do you think is best for her? Professional care. Medical supervision. A clean, safe environment where she can receive proper attention. Victoria gestured around the restaurant with obvious distaste. Look at this place, Elena. Really look at it. The equipment is ancient, the building is falling apart, and Nana is 83 years old. She can't keep doing this forever. I followed her gaze around Rosa's kitchen, seeing it through her eyes: cracked vinyl, worn linoleum, mismatched furniture that had been repaired rather than replaced. But I also saw it through my new eyes, the headquarters of an $8 million empire, property worth more than Victoria's entire net worth. What would you suggest? I asked mildly. Sunset Manor is a beautiful facility. Private rooms, 24-hour nursing care, organized activities. Nana would be safe there, properly cared for. Victoria pulled out a brochure she'd apparently brought with her. The cost is substantial, $37,000 a year, but between what we could get for selling this place and Nana's social security, we could probably manage it. What we could get for selling this place, I repeated. How much do you think that would be? Victoria shrugged. In this neighborhood? With the condition the building is in? Maybe $200,000 if we're lucky. The equipment is worthless, the location isn't great, and the customer base is, well, it's not exactly upscale. I nodded thoughtfully, making mental notes of every assumption, every miscalculation. And you think that would be enough to cover her care? For a while. And Elena, this would actually be good for you too. You could finally leave this place, maybe go back to school, build a real life for yourself instead of being trapped here playing caretaker. Playing caretaker. To the woman who had just made me a multi-millionaire. Victoria, I said carefully, what if I told you there were things about this family, about this restaurant, that you don't know? Her expression hardened. Elena, I've been patient with your romantic notions about this place, but we're talking about Nana's welfare now. This isn't about your feelings or your attachment to some fantasy about carrying on the family tradition. What if it's not a fantasy? What do you mean? I looked at my sister, really looked at her, sitting in booth 3 of Rosa's kitchen, wearing clothes that cost more than most of our customers made in a month, completely convinced of her own superiority and my incompetence. In a few minutes, I was going to destroy every assumption she'd ever made about this family. But not yet. Margaret had been clear about strategy: let Victoria commit fully to her position before revealing the truth. I mean, what if this restaurant is more important than you realize? What if there are financial considerations you haven't thought about? Victoria laughed, that crystalline laugh that had made me feel small for so many years. Elena, honey, I've seen the books. This place barely breaks even on a good month. There are no financial considerations beyond figuring out how to liquidate what little assets exist. You've seen the books? I asked Nana for them last month when I started researching care options. The restaurant brings in maybe $40,000 a year in profit, which is barely enough to cover basic living expenses. There's no retirement savings, no investments, no assets beyond this building and the equipment. My heart started beating faster. She showed you financial records? Well, she showed me what she had. Basic income and expense records for the restaurant. But Elena, even if I hadn't seen the numbers, it's obvious. Look around you. This isn't exactly a thriving business empire. I realized with crystal clarity that Nana had shown Victoria exactly what she wanted her to see, restaurant books that reflected only the diner's operations, not the massive property portfolio that generated the real income. Victoria had looked at deliberately incomplete information and drawn exactly the conclusions Nana wanted her to draw. So when you file for conservatorship, I said quietly, you'll be basing your petition on those financial records? Victoria's eyes sharpened. How did you know I was considering conservatorship? It's the logical next step, isn't it? If you believe Nana is being financially exploited, if you think I'm manipulating her into making poor decisions, conservatorship would give you legal control to protect her. Elena, I don't want to do this. But if you're pressuring her into signing over assets or making you beneficiary of what little she has, then yes, I'll file for conservatorship. I won't let you take advantage of her. I reached into my apron and turned off the recording device. I'd gotten everything we needed, Victoria's assumptions, her financial estimates, her stated intentions, her complete ignorance of the true situation. Victoria, I said, standing up, I think you should file that petition. What? I think you should file for conservatorship as soon as possible. Based on everything you've told me, everything you believe about this family and this restaurant, I think you should absolutely pursue legal action to protect Nana from me. Victoria stared at me, clearly confused by my response. Elena, are you agreeing with me? I'm saying you should do what you think is right, I said calmly. Based on what you know, or what you think you know, you should absolutely file that petition. I turned toward the kitchen, then paused. Oh, and Victoria? When you do file, make sure you include all your financial research in the documentation. Your estimates of what this place is worth, your assessment of Nana's assets, all of it. I'd hate for there to be any misunderstandings. As I walked away, I heard her muttering behind me, probably wondering why I was being so cooperative. She had no idea that she was about to step into the biggest trap of her life. And I couldn't wait to watch her fall into it. Victoria filed the conservatorship petition on Thursday morning. By Thursday afternoon, my phone was ringing non-stop. The first call came from Marcus. I almost didn't answer, we'd barely spoken in the 5 years since he married Victoria, but curiosity got the better of me. Elena, what the hell is going on? His voice was strained, almost panicked. Victoria came home from the courthouse absolutely furious, muttering about lawyers and property records and something about $8 million. She's been locked in her office making phone calls for 3 hours. $8 million? I kept my voice neutral, though my heart was racing. I have no idea what you're talking about, Marcus. That's what I said. But then she started throwing around words like fraud and hidden assets and investigation. Elena, she's talking about hiring forensic accountants. She thinks someone's been lying to the family about money. I could hear Victoria shouting in the background, though I couldn't make out the words. She sounds upset. Upset? Marcus laughed bitterly. She's acting like someone just told her the earth is flat. She keeps saying there's been some kind of mistake, that the numbers don't add up, that whoever did the property research is incompetent. Property research. My legal team had warned me this would happen. The moment Victoria filed the conservatorship petition, the court would require a comprehensive asset evaluation. She was probably getting her first look at the real property records right about now. Marcus, maybe you should let her call me directly if she wants to talk. She doesn't want to talk to you. She wants to talk to the county assessor, the city clerk, 3 different real estate attorneys, and someone at the state attorney general's office about elder fraud investigation procedures. The line went quiet for a moment, then Marcus's voice dropped. Elena, is there something Victoria doesn't know? About your grandmother, about the restaurant, about anything? Why don't you ask Victoria what she's discovered? 20 minutes later, Victoria called. I'd never heard her voice like this, shrill, desperate, barely controlled. Elena, I need you to explain something to me. I just spent 2 hours at the courthouse reviewing property records for Nana's conservatorship petition, and there's been some kind of mistake. What kind of mistake? The records show properties that can't possibly belong to our family. 17 commercial properties worth millions of dollars, all listed under Rosetti family ownership. The county assessor keeps insisting that Nana owns half the downtown district, which is obviously insane. I could picture her pacing in her home office, surrounded by printouts and legal documents that were systematically destroying every assumption she'd ever made about our family. Maybe the records are accurate, Victoria. Don't be ridiculous. I've seen Nana's financial situation. I've reviewed the restaurant books. There's no way. She stopped mid-sentence. Elena, have you been hiding money from me? I haven't been hiding anything, Victoria. Then explain to me how property records show that our grandmother, our 83-year-old grandmother who runs a failing diner, allegedly owns the building where my medical referrals work, the shopping complex where I buy my clothes, and the parking garage where Marcus and I park when we go to dinner downtown. Maybe you should ask Nana about it. I tried. She just smiled and said I should have asked earlier if I was curious about the family business. The family business, Elena. As if Rosa's kitchen is some kind of empire instead of a restaurant that barely pays its bills. There was a crash in the background, like she'd knocked something over. This doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense. The property portfolio shows rental income of over $400,000 annually. Elena, that's more than Marcus and I make combined, and we're both doctors. $400,000 annually. Margaret had mentioned that figure, but hearing Victoria say it out loud made the reality hit me fresh. While she'd been condescending to me about my small life and lack of ambition, I'd been inheriting an income stream that dwarfed her prestigious medical practice. Victoria, maybe you should calm down, Anne. Calm down? Her voice cracked. Elena, if these records are accurate, it means I've been completely wrong about everything. It means when I filed that conservatorship petition this morning claiming that Nana needs protection from financial exploitation, I was actually trying to take control of assets worth more than my house, my practice, and my entire retirement fund combined. That would be unfortunate, I said quietly. Unfortunate? Elena, it means I just filed legal documents with the court that make me look like either an idiot or a fraud. I swore under oath that our grandmother is a vulnerable elderly woman with limited assets being taken advantage of by her granddaughter. But if she actually owns millions of dollars in real estate, then I'm the one who looks like I'm trying to steal from her. The panic in her voice was escalating. I could hear papers rustling, drawers slamming, the sounds of someone frantically searching for explanations that didn't exist. There's more, she continued, her voice getting higher. I called Margaret Thornfield's office to demand an explanation, and her secretary informed me that all property transfers were completed last week. Elena, what property transfers? My stomach fluttered. This was the moment we'd been preparing for. Maybe you should ask Margaret directly. I tried. She said she couldn't discuss details without proper authorization, but that all documentation was filed with the appropriate county offices and everything was completely legal. Elena, what did you sign? What did Nana transfer to you? I took a deep breath. Victoria, when you file a conservatorship petition, don't they require you to specify exactly what assets you're trying to protect? Yes, which is why I'm calling you. I listed the restaurant building, estimated value $200,000, plus minimal business equipment and maybe $20,000 in savings. But Elena, the actual property records show assets worth 40 times what I claimed in my petition. 40 times. Even in my new reality as a multimillionaire, that number was staggering. So what happens now? I asked. I don't know. The desperation in her voice was almost painful to hear. My lawyer says I need to file an amended petition with corrected asset information, but Elena, that means admitting to the court that I had no idea what I was talking about when I filed the original paperwork. That does sound embarrassing. Embarrassing? It's professionally humiliating. I'm a doctor, Elena. I'm supposed to be competent, thorough, responsible. But I just filed a legal document claiming our grandmother needs protection from financial abuse while being completely ignorant of her actual financial situation. There was a long pause, then Victoria's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Elena, how long have you known? Known what? About the money. About the properties. About all of it. I looked around Rose's kitchen, where Nana was serving coffee to the afternoon regulars, where nothing had changed except everything. I've known for about a week, Victoria. A week. Her voice was flat. You've known for a week that our family is worth millions of dollars, and you didn't think to mention it when I was planning to put Nana in a nursing home to protect her from poverty? You never asked. I never asked. She was shouting now. Elena, you let me file a conservatorship petition based on completely false information. You let me swear to a court that you were exploiting a poor elderly woman when you actually inherited millions of dollars from her. You seemed very confident in your assessment of the situation. My assessment? Victoria's voice cracked again. Elena, I made a fool of myself in front of a judge, 2 lawyers, and a court clerk. And tomorrow, when I have to file an amended petition explaining that I was wrong about literally everything, I'm going to make an even bigger fool of myself. I heard Marcus saying something in the background, his voice urgent. Elena, I have to go. Marcus just got off the phone with his lawyer, and apparently there are some issues with our own financial situation that we need to discuss. Her voice was getting smaller, more defeated. But this isn't over. We're going to figure out what happened here, and we're going to make sure everything was done legally. The line went dead. I sat in the sudden quiet of Rose's kitchen, listening to the familiar sounds of coffee brewing and customers chatting, and realized that Victoria's real panic was just beginning. Because if Thomas Burke was right about their debt situation, and if they'd been counting on inheriting Nana's modest assets to help with their financial problems, then discovering those assets had already been transferred to me was about to become the least of their worries. 9. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was setting up for the breakfast rush when a black BMW pulled into the parking lot, not Victoria's Mercedes, but a car I didn't recognize. A man in an expensive suit stepped out, followed by Victoria herself, looking like she hadn't slept. They walked into Rose's kitchen together, and I immediately understood this was meant to be an intimidation tactic. Elena, Victoria said, her voice artificially calm, this is Robert Kellerman. He's a lawyer specializing in elder law and estate disputes. Kellerman extended his hand with the kind of firm grip that was supposed to communicate authority. Ms. Rosetti, I represent Dr. Hamilton in some concerns she has about recent property transfers involving your grandmother. Concerns, I repeated, wiping my hands on my apron. What kind of concerns? The kind that arise when an elderly person suddenly transfers millions of dollars in assets to a family member, Kellerman said smoothly. Especially when that transfer occurs shortly before another family member files for conservatorship to protect those very assets. I looked at Victoria, who couldn't quite meet my eyes. You hired a lawyer to investigate me? I hired a lawyer to protect our family, she said defensively. Elena, you have to understand how this looks from the outside. Nana lives modestly, runs a small restaurant, and then suddenly she's transferring an $8 million property portfolio to her granddaughter who's been her primary caregiver for years. How it looks, I said quietly. Kellerman pulled out a leather portfolio. Ms. Rosetti, I've reviewed the property transfer documents, and while they appear to be technically legal, the circumstances raise significant questions about undue influence, mental competency at the time of signing, and possible exploitation of a vulnerable adult. You think I exploited my grandmother? I think the timing and circumstances warrant investigation, he said carefully. An 83-year-old woman transferring her entire estate to one family member while excluding others, particularly when the transfer coincides with a conservatorship filing, suggests possible coercion or diminished capacity. Victoria leaned forward. Elena, just help us understand. Why now? Why did Nana suddenly decide to give you everything? What changed? I studied my sister's face, seeing the desperation barely concealed beneath her professional composure. What changed, Victoria, is that she finally got tired of watching you treat our family like it was beneath you. That's not, I never. You never what? You never called this place a dump? You never suggested that Nana was too old and incompetent to run her own business? You never tried to convince her to sell everything and move to an expensive nursing home? Kellerman held up a hand. Ms. Rosetti, we're not here to litigate family dynamics. We're here because my client has legitimate concerns about a substantial transfer of assets that may not have been made with full informed consent. Informed consent, I repeated. You think my grandmother didn't understand what she was doing? I think your grandmother may not have understood the full implications of transferring property worth over $8 million, Victoria said. Elena, she's 83. She runs a small restaurant. When has she ever dealt with real estate portfolios or complex financial instruments? That's when I started laughing. I couldn't help it, the irony was too perfect. What's funny? Kellerman demanded. You want to know when Nana has dealt with complex financial instruments? How about every month for the past 30 years when she's been collecting rent from 17 different commercial properties? How about every city council meeting where she's been voting on zoning changes and development permits? How about every tax season when she's been filing returns on a multi-million-dollar property portfolio? Victoria's face went white. That's impossible. Is it? Kellerman, did you actually research my grandmother's financial history, or did you just accept Victoria's assumption that she was a helpless old woman? Kellerman's confident expression wavered slightly. We reviewed the available documentation. The documentation Victoria provided, I interrupted. Which was deliberately incomplete. Tell me, did you verify the rental income records? Did you check the City Planning Commission minutes? Did you review the property management agreements dating back to the 1980s? The silence stretched uncomfortably long. You didn't, I continued. You took Victoria's word that our grandmother was financially naive, and you built your entire case around that assumption. Victoria stood up abruptly. Elena, stop playing games. If Nana has been managing all these properties for decades, why did she live so modestly? Why did she let people think the restaurant was struggling? Because she's smart, I said simply. Because she understood that wealth makes you a target. Because she wanted to test your character before deciding what to do with the family legacy. Test my character? And you failed, Victoria. Spectacularly. Kellerman tried to regain control of the conversation. Ms. Rosetti, regardless of your grandmother's historical competency, the fact remains that this transfer occurred under questionable circumstances. What questionable circumstances? Nana's voice came from the kitchen doorway. She'd been listening, and now she walked toward us with the steady, purposeful stride of someone who'd been running a business empire for 3 decades. Mrs. Rosetti, Kellerman said, rising respectfully. I represent your granddaughter Victoria in some concerns about. I heard what you represent, Nana interrupted. You represent my granddaughter's assumption that I'm a senile old woman who doesn't understand money. Victoria's voice cracked. Nana, that's not what I think. No? Then why did you try to put me in a nursing home? Why did you file papers saying I needed protection from my own family? Why did you bring a lawyer here to question my mental capacity? Because I was trying to protect you. From what? From Elena, who has cared for me every day for 10 years. From Elena, who chose to stay here and help me instead of chasing money and status. From Elena, who actually understands what this family has built. Kellerman pulled out another document. Mrs. Rosetti, with respect, the concern is that you may have been unduly influenced. By who? Nana's voice was getting sharper. By the granddaughter who gets here at 5:30 every morning? By the girl who knows every customer's name and coffee order? By the woman who has never asked me for a single dollar in 10 years? Nana, Victoria said desperately, I'm not trying to hurt anyone. I just want to make sure you're safe, that your assets are protected. Protected from what? From being inherited by someone who actually values them? That's not fair. I value this family. Do you? Nana walked to the window and pointed at the medical plaza across the street. You see that building, Victoria? The one where all your colleagues work? I own it. I've owned it for 15 years. Your precious professional network exists on my property. Victoria followed her gaze, her face growing paler. And that parking garage where you and Marcus park when you come downtown for dinner? Mine. The boutique where you spent $800 on a handbag last month? Mine. The restaurant where you celebrated your anniversary and complained about having to drive to this neighborhood? I own the building. Each revelation hit Victoria like a physical blow. For 30 years, Nana continued, I've watched you build your life on top of an empire you never bothered to acknowledge. You think you're sophisticated, successful, important, but you've been living in my world the entire time, and you never even noticed. Kellerman cleared his throat. Mrs. Rosetti, regardless of your property holdings, the legal question remains whether. The legal question, Nana said firmly, is whether my granddaughter Victoria has any standing to challenge decisions made by a competent adult about her own property. And the answer, Mr. Kellerman, is no. She turned back to Victoria. You want to know about undue influence? I'll tell you about undue influence. For 15 years, you've tried to influence me to abandon my life, sell my property, and move to an expensive facility so you could inherit whatever was left. That's undue influence, Victoria. And it didn't work. Victoria was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. Nana, I never meant, I thought I was helping. You thought you were helping yourself, Nana said quietly. And now that you know what you almost lost, what you tried to take from Elena, what you dismissed as worthless, now you want to pretend it was all about protecting me. She walked back to Victoria and took her hands gently. Cara mia, I love you. But I will not let you destroy what this family has built just because you never bothered to understand its value. Kellerman packed up his briefcase with the efficiency of someone who'd realized his case had just evaporated. Mrs. Rosetti, I think there may have been some miscommunication about the circumstances here. Perhaps we should schedule a more formal meeting to discuss. There's nothing to discuss, Nana said firmly. My property, my decisions, my family. Elena now owns everything, as was always my intention. Nana, wait. Victoria wiped her eyes and stood up, her composure cracking but her desperation making her bold. Please, just, let me understand. You're telling me that for my entire adult life, while I was building my career, working 60-hour weeks, paying off student loans, struggling to establish my practice, you were secretly wealthy the entire time? Not secretly, Nana corrected. Quietly. There's a difference. Is there? Because I remember asking you for help with medical school tuition, and you gave me $2,000 that you said was all you could spare from the restaurant savings. But if you were collecting hundreds of thousands in rental income. You never asked where the money came from, I interrupted. You just took it and complained it wasn't more. Victoria turned on me, her grief transforming into anger. Don't you dare lecture me about not asking questions, Elena. You lived here for 10 years. You saw the same modest lifestyle I saw, the same simple apartment, the same careful budgeting. And I never demanded explanations or judged what I saw, I shot back. I didn't assume Nana was incapable just because she chose to live simply. But you knew, didn't you? Victoria's voice was rising. At some point, you figured it out. When, Elena? When did you learn that your devoted granddaughter act was actually going to make you a millionaire? The accusation hit like a slap. My devoted granddaughter act? Come on. 10 years of playing the perfect caregiver, never leaving, never building your own life, always being available. Tell me you didn't know it would pay off eventually. Nana stepped between us, her voice cold. Victoria, that's enough. No, it's not enough. Victoria was crying again, but now it was angry tears. Elena gets $8 million for staying home and playing waitress, while I spent 15 years building a medical practice, serving patients, contributing to society, and I get what? Nothing. You get what you earned, Nana said quietly. What I earned? Nah, I'm a doctor. I save lives. I built something meaningful with my career. You built something meaningful for yourself, Nana corrected. Elena built something meaningful for this family, for this community. There's a difference. Kellerman cleared his throat uncomfortably. Perhaps I should step outside. Yes, Nana said without looking at him. You should. After he left, Victoria slumped back into the booth, the fight seeming to drain out of her. Nana, I don't understand. If you had all this money, all these properties, why didn't you ever tell me? Why did you let me think we were struggling? Because I needed to know who you were when you thought there was nothing to inherit. And who am I? Nana sat down across from her, suddenly looking every one of her 83 years. You're the granddaughter who comes here once a month and complains about the neighborhood. You're the one who wants to put me in a nursing home for my own good. You're the one who measures success by how far you can get from where you started. That's not fair. Isn't it? Victoria, do you know Mrs. Peterson from Booth 2? She's been coming here for coffee every morning for 12 years. Her husband died last year, and now she comes here because it's the only place where people know her name. Elena knows she takes her coffee with exactly 1 sugar cube, not packets, because that's how her husband made it. Victoria looked confused by the change of subject. Do you know Tommy Kowalski? He's 16, comes in after school for pie and homework help. His parents work double shifts, and this is where he feels safe. Elena tutors him in math twice a week, for free. What does this have to do with? It has everything to do with everything, Victoria. This restaurant isn't just a business, it's the heart of this neighborhood. Elena didn't stay here because she lacked ambition. She stayed because she understood what we were really preserving. But the money. The money is what makes it possible, Nana explained. The rental income from the properties funds this restaurant's ability to serve as more than just a business. We can afford to charge fair prices, to help people when they're struggling, to be a gathering place instead of just a profit center. I watched Victoria process this information, seeing her worldview shift in real time. But Elena gets everything, she said finally. The properties, the income, the control, everything. Yes, Nana said simply. And I get nothing. You get what you always wanted, Victoria. You get to be free from this place, from these responsibilities, from having to care about Mrs. Peterson's coffee or Tommy's homework. You get to continue your sophisticated life without being burdened by family obligations. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then, what if I want to be part of it now? What if I want to help, to be involved in the family business? Now that you know it's worth $8 million? I asked. That's not, she stopped, seeming to realize how it sounded. Elena, I know I made mistakes. I know I was wrong about a lot of things. But we're still family. Are we? I asked quietly. Because yesterday you tried to have me investigated for elder abuse. Last week you called my life choices pathetic. For 15 years, you've treated this place and everyone in it like we were beneath you. I was wrong. You were wrong about the money, Victoria. That's not the same as being wrong about us. She looked around Rose's kitchen, really looked at it, maybe for the first time. I wondered what she was seeing now, whether the cracked vinyl and worn linoleum looked different when you knew they sat on top of an $8 million empire. Elena, she said finally, what would it take for you to forgive me? I'm not sure forgiveness is the right word, I said. The question is whether you can accept that I'm in charge now. That I make the decisions about the properties, the restaurant, Nana's care. That I'm not the little sister you can dismiss anymore. Victoria was quiet for a long time. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a folded document. This is the conservatorship petition, she said, placing it on the table. I'm withdrawing it. She stood up, smoothing her skirt with hands that were still shaking slightly. Elena, I need some time to process all of this. But I want you to know, I'm proud of you. I should have said that years ago. She walked toward the door, then paused. Nana, I love you. I always have, even when I was too stupid to show it properly. After she left, Nana and I sat in the quiet of the empty restaurant. Do you think she meant it? I asked. Nana smiled that mysterious smile I'd been seeing so much lately. I think Victoria is about to learn what it means to have a sister who doesn't need her approval anymore. And that, cara mia, might be the best education she's ever received. 3 weeks later, I stood in the downtown office of Belfield Property Management, my property management company now, reviewing quarterly reports with Sarah Martinez. The numbers were staggering in a way that still made my head spin. Rental income for the month, $37,000. Property appreciation, estimated at 4% annually. Pending development opportunities, potentially worth millions more. Elena, Sarah said, sliding a development proposal across the mahogany conference table, the city is requesting a response to the Maple Street expansion project. As the primary property owner in that district, your decision will essentially determine whether the project moves forward. I stared at the proposal, a plan to widen Maple Street and add luxury condominiums that would bring young professionals to the neighborhood. The same young professionals Victoria had always assumed represented progress, sophistication, success. What's your recommendation? Financially? It's a goldmine. Property values in that area would double within 5 years. But Sarah hesitated. It would also displace about 60 low-income families currently renting in the older buildings. 60 families. People like Mrs. Peterson, like Tommy Kowalski's parents, like the single mothers Nana had mentioned who came to Rose's kitchen because they knew they'd get a good meal even when money was tight. What would Nana have done? I asked. Sarah smiled. According to the city planning meeting minutes I've been reviewing, your grandmother voted against similar development projects 4 times in the past decade. She was apparently quite vocal about preserving affordable housing. Then we vote against it. Elena, that's potentially millions of dollars in lost revenue. Sarah, what good is wealth if you use it to destroy the community that created it? She made notes on the proposal. I'll draft our response declining participation. Though I have to ask, are you sure you want to operate the same way your grandmother did? You could make changes, pursue more aggressive growth strategies. I looked out the window at downtown Belfield, seeing it with new eyes. 3 weeks ago, I'd been Elena the waitress, worried about broken freezers and slow Tuesday afternoons. Now I was Elena the property owner, making decisions that affected hundreds of people's lives and livelihoods. Sarah, schedule a meeting with all our commercial tenants. I want to understand their businesses, their challenges, their goals. If we're going to be landlords, we should be partners, not just collectors. After the meeting, I drove back to Rose's kitchen, but instead of parking in the small lot behind the building, I pulled into the garage across the street. My garage, I reminded myself, still getting used to the concept. The attendant, Miguel, waved at me with the same friendly gesture he'd been giving me for years, not knowing that his employment was now, technically, my responsibility. The afternoon rush was just beginning when I walked into the restaurant. Nana was at the grill, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been cooking professionally for 6 decades, while our part-time server, Jenny, handled the front counter. Everything looked exactly the same as it had a month ago, but my perspective had shifted completely. How was the meeting, Cara? Nana asked without looking up from the burgers she was flipping. Educational. The city wants to develop Maple Street. We're declining. She nodded approvingly. Good. Some things are more important than money. Even $8 million worth of things? Especially $8 million worth of things. Elena, you have enough money now that you never have to choose between what's right and what's profitable. That's a rare gift. I tied on my apron and started refilling the coffee station, falling back into the familiar rhythm of restaurant work. But now, instead of feeling trapped by routine, I felt anchored by purpose. Every customer I served, every table I cleaned, every conversation I had was part of something larger, a community ecosystem that my family had been nurturing for generations. Mrs. Peterson came in at her usual time, settling into booth 2 with the newspaper and her crossword puzzle. I brought her coffee without being asked, made exactly the way she liked it. "Elena, dear," she said, looking up from her puzzle, "I heard some rumors about your family coming into money. I hope that doesn't mean you'll be leaving us." "No, Mrs. Peterson. I'm not going anywhere." "Good," she said firmly. "This place wouldn't be the same without you." Tommy Kowalski arrived after school, backpack heavy with textbooks, sliding into his usual spot at the counter. I brought him his pie and milk, then sat down with the algebra homework that had been stumping him. "Miss Elena," he said as we worked through polynomial equations, "my mom heard you're rich now. She's worried you might close the restaurant." "Why would I close the restaurant, Tommy?" "I don't know. Rich people don't usually work in restaurants, do they?" I considered this. Rich people don't usually work in restaurants because they don't have to. "But Tommy, some things are worth doing even when you don't have to do them." He nodded solemnly, as if this made perfect sense to him. At closing time, I walked through Rosa's kitchen with a different kind of satisfaction than I'd felt before. This wasn't just the end of another workday, it was the conclusion of another day of stewardship. I wasn't just serving food, I was maintaining a tradition, preserving a community space, honoring a legacy that was now mine to protect and pass forward. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "Elena, I've been thinking about our conversation. Would you be willing to meet for coffee sometime?" "Not here, I know Rosa's kitchen is your domain now. Maybe somewhere neutral?" I stared at the message for a long time. Your domain. Even in her attempt at reconciliation, Victoria was still thinking in terms of territory, control, dominance. She didn't understand that Rosa's kitchen wasn't my domain, it was my responsibility. I typed back, "Victoria, you're welcome at Rosa's kitchen anytime. It's not my domain. It's our family's restaurant, and you're still family." Her response came quickly, "Are you sure? After everything I said, everything I tried to do?" "I'm sure. But Victoria, I'm in charge now. If you come back, it's on my terms, with my rules, respecting what we've built here. Can you accept that?" The typing indicator appeared and disappeared several times before her final message, "I'm learning to." I locked up the restaurant and stood for a moment on the sidewalk, looking at the neon sign that still flickered where the O was broken. Tomorrow, I could afford to fix it. I could afford to renovate the entire building, update the equipment, modernize everything. But maybe some things were worth keeping exactly as they were. As I walked to my car, parked in my own garage, on my own property, in the neighborhood my family had quietly shaped for decades, I realized that wealth hadn't changed who I was. It had simply given me the power to be more fully myself. And for the first time in my life, that felt like enough. 1 year later, I stood before the Belfield City Council holding a folder that would have been unimaginable to me 18 months ago. Inside were architectural plans, financial projections, and legal documents for the Elena Rosetti Community Development Initiative, a project that would transform 3 blocks of downtown Belfield while preserving its heart. "Council members," I began, my voice steady in the packed chamber, "today I'm presenting a development plan that proves profitability and community preservation aren't mutually exclusive. The proposal was ambitious: convert 2 of my underutilized properties into affordable housing units, expand Rosa's Kitchen into a community center with job training programs, and create a small business incubator that would give local entrepreneurs the same kind of quiet support my family had provided for decades. The total investment is $2.3 million, I continued, funded entirely through the Rosetti Family Trust. No taxpayer money, no public debt, no displacement of current residents." In the front row, Victoria sat with Marcus, both of them taking notes. She'd been coming to these monthly council meetings for 6 months now, not to challenge my decisions, but to understand them. The transformation in our relationship had been gradual, built on small moments rather than grand gestures. Last month, she'd offered to provide free health screenings for elderly residents in my buildings. The month before, she'd started volunteering at Rosa's Kitchen on Saturday mornings, learning to make Nana's marinara sauce with a patience I'd never seen from her before. The Job Training Center, I explained to the council, will focus on practical skills, culinary arts, small business management, basic financial literacy. We're partnering with Belfield Community College to offer certification programs. After the presentation, during the public comment period, Mrs. Peterson stood up with the help of her walker. At 87, she was one of my oldest tenants and had become something of a neighborhood spokesperson. I've lived in this community for 43 years, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. I've seen developers come and go, politicians make promises they don't keep, and businesses that claim to care about the neighborhood until it's time to pay taxes or hire local workers. She turned to look at me. Elena Rosetti isn't a developer or a politician. She's a neighbor who happens to own property. There's a difference. When my heat went out last winter, she didn't send a maintenance company. She came herself with a space heater and stayed until the repair was finished. When the Kowalski boy needed help with college applications, she didn't write a check. She spent 3 evenings helping him write essays. The council voted unanimously to approve the development plan. Afterward, as people filed out of the chamber, Victoria approached me in the lobby. Elena, that was impressive. The presentation, the planning, the way you handled the questions, you've become quite the executive. I learned from watching you, I said, and was surprised to realize I meant it. All those years of seeing you in professional settings, managing difficult conversations, standing your ground, I absorbed more than I realized. She smiled, and for a moment I saw the sister I'd looked up to when we were children. I've been thinking about something you said last year. About how I measured success by how far I could get from where I started. And I think I was running from the wrong thing. I thought I was escaping poverty and limitation, but what I was really running from was obligation, connection, responsibility for anything beyond my own success. We walked outside together, into the crisp October evening. Downtown Belfield was bustling with life, young families, elderly couples, teenagers from the community college program, small business owners closing up their shops. Many of them nodded or waved as we passed, and I realized that this was what wealth actually looked like when it was working properly, not isolation and luxury, but integration and community. Victoria, I said as we reached our cars, I have a proposition for you. What kind of proposition? The community center is going to need a medical clinic. Nothing fancy, basic health services, preventive care, health education programs. I know it's not as prestigious as cosmetic dermatology, but... Elena, she interrupted, are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a chance to be part of something. To use your skills for the community that made our family's success possible. She was quiet for a long moment. What would it pay? Enough. Not as much as your current practice generates, but enough to live comfortably. Plus, you'd be helping to build something that could last for generations. Like Nana did. Like Nana did. 6 months later, Dr. Victoria Rosetti Hamilton opened the Rose's Kitchen Community Health Center in the renovated space next to the restaurant. Her first patients were Mrs. Peterson, Tommy Kowalski's mother, and 3 elderly men who'd been putting off medical care because they couldn't afford the copays at the medical plaza across the street. The plaza that was still, technically, their landlord's building. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. On the 1-year anniversary of Nana's passing, she died peacefully in her sleep 8 months after transferring the properties. Satisfied that her legacy was secure, I organized a block party on Elm Street. The entire neighborhood came out, families from the affordable housing units, small business owners from the incubator program, students from the job training center, regulars from Rose's Kitchen. Victoria worked the health screening booth she'd set up, taking blood pressures and answering questions about diabetes prevention. Marcus helped Tommy, now a freshman at Belfield Community College studying business management, coordinate the volunteer schedule. You know, Victoria said during a quiet moment, as we watched neighbors talking and children playing in the street that had been closed to traffic for the evening, I spent 15 years trying to build something impressive. But I think this might be the first thing I've ever helped build that's actually important. What's the difference? I asked. Impressive things make people think you're successful. Important things make people's lives better. As the sun set over downtown Belfield, I looked around at the community my family had quietly nurtured for 3 generations. The restaurant where Nana had served thousands of meals. The buildings where families had built their lives. The streets where children had grown up safe and supported. This wasn't about revenge anymore, if it ever really had been. This wasn't about proving Victoria wrong or showing her what she'd missed. This was about understanding that some legacies are worth more than their monetary value. Some inheritances come with obligations that are also opportunities. Some forms of wealth are measured not in what you can take, but in what you can give. Every morning, I still arrive at Rose's kitchen at 5:30 a.m. I still flip the sign from closed to open, still make the first pot of coffee, still greet the early customers by name. But now I do it knowing that each cup of coffee served, each conversation shared, each small kindness offered is part of something larger, a community that my family built, that I've chosen to preserve, and that will hopefully outlast us all. And when people ask me what it's like to inherit millions of dollars, I tell them the truth: the money was just the beginning. The real inheritance was learning that you can build something worth keeping. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.